I stood in front of the cold, unwelcoming door of my father's house, staring at the note taped to it. Private family matter. Stay away. It read in my brother's unmistakable scrawl. My heart dropped into my stomach. I hadn't been inside that house for nearly a year, but I had never been shut out like this before. I had always been the outsider in my family, never quite fitting in with my father, George, or my older brother, James. They had their own bond, a private world where I was never invited. But this was different. They had never made it so clear that I didn't belong, not until now. The funeral had been a quiet affair, no more than a few distant relatives attending. My father's health had been deteriorating for months, but it was still a shock when the call came. I should have felt something more, but the years of emotional distance made it hard to muster any deep sorrow. Still, when the will was read, I had expected something, some trace of acknowledgement that I was his daughter. Instead, I was left with nothing. No inheritance, no property, not even a mention in the will. My brother had gotten everything. My mind raced as I tried to piece together what had happened. There had to be an explanation. James had always been the golden child. He was everything our father had wanted in a son. Successful, ambitious, and well-liked by everyone. I, on the other hand, had always been the disappointment. I had never been the perfect daughter, never the one to meet their expectations. My father had made that clear time and time again. But I had never thought it would go this far. I had hoped that the will might bring clarity, that maybe there was a misunderstanding or an error. But when I walked into the lawyer's office for the reading, I was met with cold indifference. The lawyer, a stern man named Mr. Hunt, went through the formalities before reading the document. I, George Ford, leave all my assets, property, and wealth to my son James Ford, with the exception of Emily Ford, my daughter, who is hereby disinherited. The words hit me like a slap in the face. Disinherited. I couldn't breathe. The weight of it pressed down on me, and I felt my world unravel. I looked at James, sitting across from me with a smug, self-satisfied expression, as though this was his rightful inheritance. His eyes met mine, cold and unapologetic. I tried to speak, to ask why, but the words stuck in my throat. It didn't matter. My father's decision was final. I was nothing to them. But as I sat there in stunned silence, I noticed something odd, a second envelope. It was tucked under the stack of documents the lawyer had been reading from. The envelope was addressed to me. Mr. Hunt's gaze flicked toward the envelope. Ah, yes, there is another document. One that was kept secret from the rest of the family. I couldn't believe my ears. Another document? My mind struggled to process the reality of what had just happened. The word disinherited echoed in my head as I stared at the lawyer, Mr. Hunt, who now had an envelope in his hands that wasn't part of the original reading. This document, he said, his voice low and measured, was added shortly before Mr. Ford's passing. It was sealed and intended for you alone. I barely heard the rest of his words. My body was frozen but my hands were shaking. I could feel the eyes of the others in the room on me, but it was James's eyes that burned into my skin. He looked uncomfortable, his usual smug demeanor replaced with something close to unease. Open it, I said, my voice trembling. I couldn't even bring myself to call it a will. It wasn't a will. It was a letter, a message from beyond the grave, a final attempt to reach me. Mr. Hunt carefully slit open the envelope and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He placed it on the table before me, the ink on the paper crisp against the white background. I reached forward, the anticipation like a knot in my stomach. Please read it, I urged, my voice more desperate than I intended. Mr. Hunt cleared his throat and began to read aloud, his eyes scanning the paper. To my beloved daughter, Emily. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. My father's handwriting, my father's voice, even now after everything, felt like a bitter taste in my mouth. He had been distant, emotionally cold, his affection reserved for James. But this was something else. I know I have failed you, Emily, in many ways. I should have loved you more, been there for you more. My actions toward you have been unjust, and for that I am truly sorry. I cannot undo the hurt I have caused you. However, I have made provisions in my will to make amends, even if it is too late. You will find that I have left you a portion of my estate, something that James does not know about. This is your inheritance. a legacy that I wanted you to have, but could never bring myself to give you in life. I hope this helps you find peace, my dear daughter. You are my blood, and I have always loved you in my way." There was a pause as Mr. Hunt finished reading, the words hanging in the air like a fragile thread. I felt my pulse racing. Was this a lie? A trick? Or had my father truly left me something? "You left me something," I whispered, more to myself than anyone else. Mr. Hunt looked at me with a mixture of sympathy and solemnity. "Yes, but I'm afraid there's more to this. Your father's last wishes were not entirely clear. There is a clause here that I need to read next, one that could change everything." I swallowed hard. The knot in my stomach tightened. What was this? What else could be hidden in a man's final words? The lawyer reached into the envelope again and pulled out a second, smaller sheet of paper, clearly different from the first. This one was typed. It wasn't written by my father's hand. "If James Ford contests the following provisions, the estate shall be divided differently. Emily Ford is entitled to the family estate at 22 Elmwood Avenue, along with all financial holdings associated with it. This includes stocks, bonds, and investments. The shares previously believed to belong to James shall be transferred to Emily upon the event of James's decision to deny these terms." The words hit me like a jolt of electricity. I could barely breathe. The estate, the very thing my father had always denied me, had been intended for me all along. Not James. Not anyone else. My inheritance, hidden in plain sight, was mine. I could feel the weight of everyone's eyes on me now. I glanced at James, who had gone pale. His fists clenched on the table, and I saw the corner of his lip twitch. For the first time, he wasn't the one with all the answers. For the first time, the power wasn't in his hands. "You see," Mr. Hunt continued, "your father's provisions were clear, but they were dependent on James's choices. This document was a safeguard." James's voice cut through the silence, harsh and defensive. "This is ridiculous," he snapped. "I don't care what that paper says. It's my inheritance. I'm not letting her." "James," Mr. Hunt interrupted firmly, "you've no legal standing to contest this. Your father's wishes were clear." I felt a flicker of something inside me. Hope? Justice? For so many years I had been the afterthought, the one left behind. Now this was my chance. Not just to claim what was rightfully mine, but to finally be seen by the father I had always wanted to impress. "Emily," James said, his voice softer now but still laced with anger, "you can't take this from me. I've worked my entire life to build this." I felt the sting of his words, but it didn't matter anymore. I wasn't the same person who had walked into this room. "You've had everything, James. This isn't about work. This is about the truth. And the truth is, this estate, this legacy is mine. It always was." Mr. Hunt folded the documents and placed them in front of me. "The law is clear, Miss Ford. You will need to have the estate properly transferred. We can start the process as soon as possible." As I left the office that day, holding the papers that would change everything, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The battle with James had only just started. But this time, I wasn't going to lose. I couldn't shake the images from that day, the lawyer's office, the look in James's eyes as he tried to claw back control. My mind was still reeling from the shock of the will's contents. But the weight of the victory was already starting to feel heavy. It wasn't just about the house or the money. It was about proving to myself, and to James, that I wasn't invisible anymore. I took the papers with me everywhere. At night, I spread them out on the table and stared at the typed words, memorizing every clause. It was mine, all of it. And yet, the more I looked at it, the more questions arose. Why had my father kept this hidden? Why had he left it until the very end? I spent the next few days going over the legal details with Mr. Hunt, who was kind enough to explain the next steps in the process. The key would be transferring the property title from James's name to mine, but James wouldn't make it easy. He was already threatening to contest the will, publicly and loudly, something that would drag the process out and likely result in a legal battle that could last for months, if not longer. I wasn't prepared for the full force of James's wrath when he showed up at my doorstep. "You think you've won?" His voice was low but seething with contempt. "You think that paper means anything? I won't let you steal what's mine." I stared at him from the doorway. my hand gripping the doorknob as if it could somehow hold me steady. The anger was raw in his voice, but it wasn't just anger. It was desperation. He was scared. Scared of losing everything. "This isn't your inheritance, James. This was never yours," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's mine. It always has been." "Don't get too comfortable," he sneered, a cold laugh escaping him. "I've already spoken to my lawyer. We'll drag this out in court. You'll never get a penny." His words stung, but I didn't let them show. "You can try," I said. "But it's not going to work. The law's on my side now." James gritted his teeth, stepping closer, trying to intimidate me. But I stood firm. "This is over, James. I'm not backing down. Not this time." He glared at me, his eyes cold with spite. "You'll regret this. You'll regret ever crossing me." With that, he turned and stormed off, slamming the door behind him with such force that the walls shook. I was left standing there, heart pounding, feeling the weight of his words settle deep into my chest. But I couldn't afford to let fear win. I had to keep moving forward. I had to prove that I wasn't just some shadow in my family's history. I wasn't going to let James push me back into the margins again. I called Mr. Hunt the next day and asked him to arrange a meeting with a judge. The sooner I could start the process of transferring the estate to my name, the better. To my surprise, Mr. Hunt had already taken action. "Emily," he said over the phone, "I've arranged a preliminary hearing. It's next week. We'll need to present your case before a probate judge." It felt like the first real step in reclaiming everything that had been stolen from me. But I knew it wouldn't be easy. James had money, resources, and influence. He'd fight tooth and nail to make sure I didn't get what was rightfully mine. The day of the hearing arrived quickly, and I found myself sitting in the cold, sterile courtroom, surrounded by the harsh sounds of lawyers and murmurs from the crowd. James was already there, sitting on the other side of the room with his lawyer beside him. I didn't look at him, but I could feel his eyes burning into me. When my name was called, I stood and walked forward, taking a seat at the table in front of the judge. The courtroom felt so vast, so impersonal, but it was a place where I would finally have a chance to make my case. Mr. Hunt stood beside me, his usual calm demeanor a steady presence as he addressed the judge. "Your Honor, we are here today to request that the terms of George Ford's will be upheld, and that the estate, including the property at 22 Elmwood Avenue, be transferred to his daughter, Emily Ford, as per her father's final wishes." James's lawyer, a slick man named Richard Clark, immediately rose to his feet. "Your Honor, we contest this. The will was not executed properly. There are serious questions about the authenticity of the document and its timing. My client, James Ford, is the rightful heir." I could see James seething behind his lawyer, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. His lawyer continued, presenting a lengthy argument about the irregularities in the will, questioning its validity based on timing and lack of witnesses. But as Mr. Hunt began to present the details of the secret clause in the will, I felt a surge of confidence. The law was clear, and the law for once was on my side. The days following the preliminary hearing were a blur of documents, meetings, and sleepless nights. I had expected James to challenge the will, but I wasn't prepared for the lengths he would go to. Every legal tactic, every argument he could muster, was being thrown against me. His lawyer, Richard Clark, was a master of manipulation. With every word, he painted me as an opportunist, a woman who was seizing the moment to claim a fortune that wasn't rightfully hers. As the next hearing approached, I felt the pressure mounting. The media had gotten wind of the story, and suddenly my personal life was on display for the entire town to see. It wasn't just a family dispute, it was a spectacle. The courtroom was packed with spectators, reporters, and photographers, all eager to catch a glimpse of the drama unfolding. It felt like the world was watching, and I hated it. James was enjoying every second of it. He sat in the front row, his eyes gleaming with self-assurance. His presence was a reminder that he had the power, the resources, and the reputation to make this drag on for as long as he wanted. I arrived early, taking my seat at the table with Mr. Hunt. He placed a reassuring hand on my shoulder, but even his calm demeanor couldn't quell the storm brewing in my mind. I knew this wouldn't be easy. James was determined to make me suffer. The hearing began and the judge, a stern woman named Judge Mason, called the room to order. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as Mr. Hunt stood to present his argument. He was calm, measured, presenting the case with quiet authority. The terms of the will were solid. The secret clause was legitimate. My father's wishes had been made clear. But then Richard Clark stood up. He was a tall man, well-dressed, his voice smooth and confident. "Your Honor," he began, "my client, James Ford, has every right to question the validity of this will. It was drawn up hastily, without proper witnesses, and most importantly, it was never signed by the deceased in the presence of a notary. The timing of the document also raises significant concerns. It was added at the last minute, shortly before Mr. Ford's death. How can we be sure that these were truly his final wishes?" The room fell silent. I had anticipated that he would question the timing, but hearing it aloud in the courtroom made the doubts creep in. Mr. Hunt responded quickly, pointing out that the will was valid under state law, but the damage had already been done. James's lawyer wasn't finished. Furthermore, we have reason to believe that Emily Ford had access to the will before her father's death. She could have altered the document herself. The accusation hit me like a slap. I froze, my stomach turning in knots. The idea that I would forge a will, especially after everything that had happened, seemed impossible. But it didn't matter. Richard Clark's words had already planted seeds of doubt in the judge's mind. Judge Mason turned to me, her eyes sharp. "Miss Ford, can you confirm that you had no prior knowledge of this document before your father's passing?" I nodded quickly, trying to maintain my composure. I had no idea it existed until it was read to me by Mr. Hunt. I did not alter or tamper with any documents. But even as I spoke, I could see the skepticism in the judge's eyes. She wasn't convinced. James leaned forward, his voice cutting through the tension. "You have no idea what this has cost me, Emily. This isn't just about money. This is about family. You're tearing everything apart for a few acres of land and a house. You never cared about any of this." His words stung, not because they were true, but because of the venom behind them. I had spent my entire life trying to gain my father's approval, trying to fit into the mold he had made for us, but it was never enough. And now, I was the villain in his eyes, the one who was taking everything away from him. The judge seemed to waver, her gaze flicking between James and me. The tension in the room was palpable. She took a moment to consult with the court clerk, and I could feel my heart in my throat. This was it. This was the moment that could decide everything. "I will need time to review the evidence," Judge Mason finally said. "I'll reconvene in 1 week to render a decision." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as she dismissed us. As I walked out of the room, the weight of the setback hit me all at once. James had successfully cast doubt on the will, and I was no closer to winning this battle than I had been a week ago. But I wasn't giving up. The next day, I found myself staring at the papers again. Mr. Hunt had assured me that the will was solid, but there was something I had to check, something that could turn the tide in my favor. I searched through the legal documents and found the name of the notary who had witnessed my father's signing of the original will. The signature on the document matched perfectly, but the name of the notary was unfamiliar. I needed to find that person. I reached out to Mr. Hunt, telling him about my discovery. "If we can track down the notary who witnessed it, we might be able to confirm everything," he said, his voice steady. "This could be the key to winning the case." I had never felt more alone. The pressure of the past few weeks had taken its toll, and as I sat in the quiet of my apartment, the walls seemed to close in around me. The courtroom defeat still lingered, but it wasn't just the legal battle that weighed heavily on my mind. It was the isolation, the feeling of being abandoned by everyone I thought I could trust. I reached out to Mr. Hunt about the notary, but the search wasn't as easy as I had hoped. The name on the will, Lorraine Harrington, didn't appear in any of the local directories, nor did she seem to have any connections to the town. The few people I had reached out to had never heard of her. I was starting to wonder if this would turn into another dead end. Days turned into weeks, and the strain of the case was starting to erode my hope. James's legal team was relentless, and every attempt I made to find a lead on the notary was met with a frustrating silence. The once clear path to justice was now clouded with doubt and uncertainty. My friends, the few I had left, were urging me to drop the case, telling me that the emotional toll wasn't worth it. Even Mr. Hunt seemed distracted, his usual calm demeanor beginning to crack under the pressure of the extended legal battle. He assured me that we were doing everything we could, but I could see the exhaustion in his eyes. One night, I sat at my desk, the papers from the hearing spread out in front of me. I ran my fingers over the typed clauses, looking for something, anything, that could tip the scales in my favor. It was then that I noticed it. A tiny detail in the bottom corner of the page, an address. Lorraine Harrington, 215, Roslyn Avenue, apartment 3A. It wasn't much, but it was a lead. The address wasn't far from where I lived. My heart raced as I grabbed my coat and set out to find her. I didn't know if she was the key to everything, but I had to try. I arrived at the address later that evening. The building was older, a bit rundown, but not unusual for the area. I took a deep breath and rang the buzzer for apartment 3A. There was a long pause before a voice crackled through the intercom. Yes. I'm looking for Lorraine Harrington, I said, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. I'm Emily Forte. I'm trying to verify some documents related to my late father's will. The line went silent for a moment. Then the door buzzed open without a word. I climbed the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. The door to apartment 3A was cracked open when I arrived, and a woman in her late 50s answered it. She was tall, with graying hair and sharp features, but her eyes were tired. Yes, she asked, eyeing me warily. Lorraine Harrington? I asked again, though I already knew it was her. Yes, that's me. What's this about? I'm trying to verify the details of my father's will. You were the notary who witnessed it, I said, my heart racing. Her eyes narrowed, and for a moment she didn't speak. Then she stepped aside and motioned for me to come in. I don't normally talk about this, she said as I entered, her voice low and hesitant. But I suppose it's only fair that you know the truth. Your father. He wasn't the man you think he was. I froze. What do you mean? She looked around, as if making sure no one else could hear. Your father didn't sign that will willingly. He was under duress. Someone was pressuring him. I don't know who, but I know it wasn't just him making those decisions. My mind was spinning. This was a revelation I hadn't expected. Who was pressuring him? I asked, my voice shaking. I don't know, but I saw the way he looked at the document. I saw his hands shaking when he signed it. It wasn't his choice. He didn't want to do it, but he did. She hesitated before adding, I've always felt guilty about it. I didn't say anything at the time. But now with you here, I think you deserve to know the truth. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but they only led to more questions. Who had been threatening my father? Why hadn't he told me? Do you have any idea who could have been behind this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She shook her head. No. But I remember the day he came to my office. He looked like a man who had been broken, like someone had forced him into a corner. I didn't pry. It wasn't my place. But I've regretted it ever since. I felt a surge of anger and betrayal flood through me. My father, my distant, cold father, had been manipulated. But by who? And why? I left Lorraine's apartment with more questions than answers. She had confirmed that the will hadn't been entirely my father's decision, but it hadn't given me the clarity I so desperately needed. As I walked through the dark streets, I felt more alone than ever. James was still out there, still fighting to take what wasn't his. And now, I had a new enemy, someone or something, that had pushed my father to disinherit me. I had to find out who it was, and I had to stop them before they could destroy me completely. I couldn't let go of the conversation with Lorraine. The idea that my father, the man who had always appeared so controlled, so composed, had been under someone's thumb, forced to make decisions he didn't want to, was too much to ignore. But the question was, who had been the puppet master? The days that followed were consumed by an obsessive search through my father's past. I spent hours going through his old records, his office files, and even old family photo albums. The deeper I dug, the more I realized how little I actually knew about him. It was like discovering that I had lived my entire life in the shadow of a stranger. I reached out to people who had known my father back in his younger days. There were whispers, fleeting conversations, and vague references to old business dealings, but nothing concrete. He had kept his personal life locked away, and every door I knocked on seemed to lead to another dead end. But then something unexpected happened. One evening, while I was going through my father's old correspondence, business letters, tax forms, and various legal documents, I found an envelope that had been tucked away in a drawer, hidden behind some old folders. It was an unmarked envelope, yellowed with age, and it had no return address. Inside there was a letter. The handwriting was familiar, my father's, but the words on the page sent a chill down my spine. I don't know how much longer I can keep this from Emily. The pressure is unbearable. I can't give her the inheritance yet, not until I've secured the deal with them. They're threatening everything I hold dear. I'll find a way to make it right eventually, but for now, I have to protect James. He's too young to understand the consequences of our actions. The letter was signed George Ford, but there was something unsettling about it. He had written this long before his death, and it seemed to suggest that there was a third party involved, someone who had been pulling the strings in our family for years. I didn't know what to make of it at first. The mention of James was nothing new. My brother had always been the favored one, the golden child. But what caught my attention was the mention of them. Who were they? And what had my father been hiding from me all this time? The letter raised more questions than it answered, and it felt like my world was starting to crumble. My father's legacy, the one I had fought so hard to claim, was now entangled in a web of secrets I wasn't prepared for. I couldn't stop thinking about the words in that letter. I'll protect James. He's too young to understand. What had my father meant by that? Was James involved in this? Had he known about the pressure my father had been under? And who were these mysterious figures who had been manipulating everything from the shadows? I decided to confront James. I had to know what he knew. The next evening, I arranged to meet him at a cafe. It wasn't the ideal place for a confrontation, but I needed him to answer my questions. When he arrived, his usual air of superiority was gone. There was something different about him now, a hint of uncertainty, as if he knew that things were slipping through his fingers. I didn't expect to see you here, he said, his voice guarded. I need answers, James, I said, my voice firm. What do you know about this? I slid the letter across the table, watching as his eyes scanned the words. His face remained impassive, but I could see the tension building behind his eyes. I told you before, Emily. This isn't your battle. You don't understand what's at stake here, he said, his tone defensive. I don't understand? I repeated, feeling the anger rise within me. I'm the one who's been disinherited. I'm the one who's been shut out of everything, while you've had everything handed to you on a silver platter. But now I'm starting to understand a whole lot more than I ever wanted to. What's going on, James? Who is them? He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, his eyes darting around the cafe. I could feel the walls closing in on him, and for the first time I saw the cracks in his facade. I can't talk about it, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. You can't or you won't? I shot back. You owe me an explanation. This is about more than just the house or the money. This is about our family. I deserve to know what's going on. James looked at me for a long moment, his expression torn. Finally he spoke, his voice quiet and full of reluctance. It's not just about us, Emily. It's about the business, the company my father built. There were people, investors, business partners who wanted more control. They made threats. They forced my father to make decisions he didn't want to. He was trying to protect the family legacy, but he couldn't keep it all together. So you knew? I asked, stunned by his confession. You knew about all this and said nothing? I didn't have a choice. Neither of us did. His eyes hardened, and I could see the bitterness in them. I've been stuck in the middle of it for years. There was never any room for you in this world, Emily. It wasn't your fight. It wasn't your responsibility. I felt a surge of anger, but there was also a pang of understanding. My father had kept me out of this, out of the family business, out of the decisions that had shaped our lives. And James, in his own way, had been trapped too. But it wasn't enough. Not anymore. I'm done being shut out, James, I said, my voice cold and resolute. This is my fight now, and I'll make sure the truth comes out, no matter what it takes. The weight of the truth was heavier than I expected. As I walked away from the cafe, My mind was buzzing with the revelations James had reluctantly shared. There had been investors, business partners, people I had never heard of, yet they had dictated the course of my family's life. My father in his final years had been trying to protect us all, protect me, even as the world he built was crumbling around him. But now it was my turn. I had learned enough. I knew what had to be done. The pieces were coming together, and I could feel the final confrontation just around the corner. I met with Mr. Hunt the next morning to go over my strategy. I was no longer a passive participant in this fight for my inheritance. I was ready to take control. "Emily," Mr. Hunt said, his voice calm yet concerned, "you need to be careful. James is not someone to take lightly. He has resources, connections in the business world. He won't go down without a fight, and neither will the people behind him." "I'm not backing down," I said firmly. "It's time to expose the truth, no matter the cost. This isn't just about the estate anymore. It's about everything my father was trying to protect, everything that was taken from us. It's about justice." Mr. Hunt looked at me, his expression one of quiet respect. "You're determined, I can see that. But remember, sometimes the truth can be a dangerous thing. The fallout could affect more than just your family." I nodded, acknowledging the weight of his words. But I was prepared. I had already made my decision. The hearing was set for the following week. As the day approached, the media circus surrounding the case grew louder. The public was fascinated by the drama unfolding between James and me. I had become a symbol of justice to some, a villain to others. But none of that mattered now. This was about family. This was about my father's legacy. On the day of the hearing, I arrived early. The courtroom was buzzing with reporters, photographers, and spectators. James was already seated, flanked by his lawyer Richard Clark. His expression was unreadable, but I could feel his eyes on me as I entered. He had made it clear that he wouldn't let me take what he thought was his. But this time I was prepared to take him on. The judge, Judge Mason, called the court to order, and the proceedings began. Mr. Hunt presented our case with precision, outlining the facts and the legal standing of the will. We had evidence that James had known about the undue influence on my father. The letter I had found, the testimony from Lorraine Harrington, and the documents that linked the business dealings to the manipulation, everything was pointing toward one clear conclusion. James and the investors had forced my father into submission. Then it was James's turn. He stood, facing the judge, his posture stiff and his voice cold. "Your Honor," he began, his tone measured but full of authority. "This is a simple matter of family inheritance. My father made his wishes clear. Emily has no legal claim to the estate. She is simply trying to use this court to settle a personal vendetta, to take what was never hers." I could see the desperation behind his words. The calm exterior was cracking, and I knew it wouldn't be long before the truth came out. Richard Clark stood beside him, ready to argue. "Your Honor, we contest the validity of this will on the grounds of undue influence and lack of proper documentation. The documents presented by Miss Ford are dubious at best, and the timing of the will raises serious concerns about its authenticity." The courtroom fell into tense silence as Mr. Hunt rose to respond. "Your Honor, we have all the necessary evidence to prove the legitimacy of this will. What we also have is the testimony of Lorraine Harrington, who witnessed the signing of the will. She can confirm that Mr. Ford was coerced into making decisions against his will." James's face went pale. I saw him flinch at the mention of Lorraine's name. It was the crack in his armor I had been waiting for. "We also have evidence," Mr. Hunt continued, "that links Mr. Ford's business dealings to the investors who pressured him into disinheriting his daughter. This wasn't a simple matter of inheritance. This was a case of manipulation, of a man being forced into a corner, and forced to make choices that weren't his own." James opened his mouth to protest, but the judge raised her hand, silencing him. She had heard enough. "I will review all of the evidence presented here," Judge Mason said, her voice firm. "But let me make it clear. The law is on the side of truth. No one is above the law, and no one can be forced to make decisions that go against their will. I will render my decision soon." The tension in the room was palpable as the proceedings concluded. James's face was a mask of fury, but there was something else in his eyes, fear. Fear that he was losing control. As I walked out of the courtroom, I felt a sense of calm settle over me. For the first time, I felt like I had a real chance at justice. The truth was finally being heard. But I knew that the final reckoning would come soon. This wasn't over yet. The following week passed in a blur. The court proceedings had drained me, physically and emotionally. Every morning I woke up with a tight knot in my stomach, unsure of what the judge would decide. The weight of the past few months, the years of feeling cast aside, the anger at being disinherited, the sting of family betrayal, had left me exhausted. But I knew I couldn't stop now. Finally, the day arrived. I sat in the courtroom once more, my hands trembling as I waited for Judge Mason to deliver her decision. James sat across from me, his usual smugness replaced with a tight-lipped expression of frustration. His lawyer, Richard Clark, appeared just as tense. The atmosphere in the room was thick with anticipation. Judge Mason entered the room, her footsteps echoing on the wooden floor. She took her seat and adjusted her glasses before looking up at both sides. After careful review of the evidence presented, I have come to a decision, she began, her voice calm but firm. The will of George Ford, as it was originally written, is valid. Emily Ford is the rightful heir to the estate, including the property at 22 Elmwood Avenue, and all assets associated with it. Any attempts to contest this will are hereby dismissed. I couldn't breathe. The words took a moment to sink in. I had won. The inheritance that had been stolen from me, the life that had been denied, was now mine. James's face drained of color. He looked at me, his jaw clenched tight, but there was nothing left for him to say. The truth had come to light. The manipulation, the business deals, the coercion, all of it had been exposed. He had no more arguments left. The judge continued, addressing James directly. Mr. Ford, while you may have once believed that this was your inheritance, the reality is that your father's final wishes were not your decision to make. His actions, influenced by outside forces, do not invalidate his intent to provide for his daughter. The estate is hers by right. James stood, his fists clenched at his sides. He didn't speak, but the anger in his eyes was unmistakable. I'm sorry, the judge added, her tone softening slightly, but your actions in contesting the will, including attempting to discredit your sister, have not only failed but also exposed the harm caused by your family's hidden dealings. I encourage you to reflect on the consequences of your choices moving forward. I exhaled slowly, my heart racing, but there was a sense of finality in those words. The years of struggle, the isolation, the pain, it was all starting to feel like a distant memory. The long, drawn-out battle for my father's estate was finally over, and I had emerged victorious. As the court session ended, Mr. Hunt turned to me, a proud yet kind smile on his face. You did it, Emily. You fought for what was rightfully yours, and the truth won. I nodded, still trying to process it all. But deep down I felt lighter. I felt free. James stormed out of the courtroom without a word, but I didn't care anymore. His anger, his bitterness, it no longer had power over me. The estate was mine, yes, but more importantly, my dignity had been restored. I had faced the darkness of my family's secrets and had come out the other side stronger. In the days that followed, I took the necessary steps to transfer the property into my name. The house at 22 Elmwood Avenue became a symbol not only of my inheritance but of my resilience, my ability to rise above the betrayal and create a new path forward. As I stood in the empty house for the first time, I felt a deep sense of peace. It was my home now, not just because of the legal documents but because I had earned it. I had fought for it, and in doing so, I had reclaimed a part of myself that I had thought lost forever. I often thought back to that moment when I first read my father's letter, the one where he had said, "I will make it right eventually." It wasn't the way he had imagined, but it was enough. He had protected me, even if it was only in the end. I placed a framed picture of my father on the mantel, a quiet tribute to the man he had been and the father he could never fully be. And as for James, he would find his own path. The truth had changed everything, but it had not broken me. In the end, justice had prevailed. Where truth and legacy intertwine, sometimes the greatest victory is reclaiming what was always yours. Author's note: this story is a reminder that justice, even when long delayed, always finds its way to the surface. Emily's journey of discovery and strength shows us that while family ties can be complicated and filled with betrayal, the truth, when uncovered, can be the most powerful force of all. Her victory is not just a triumph over her brother, but a reclaiming of her own worth and legacy. Let this story serve as a testament to the resilience of those who fight for what is rightfully theirs, no matter the obstacles.